Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Books I Should Have Read a Long Time Ago, which have been desultorily chosen based on how I feel at the time that I'm choosing them. So I had just read those two Ellis Peters books from the Inspector Phelps series because, I got them umpty squillion years ago as a birthday present, and I decided I should probably have read Brother Cadfael years ago because, I did the whole Dame Fervisa series, and Brother Cadfael is, I suppose, closely associated with, or it should be considered similar to, in some ways, Dame Fervisa, at least conceptually. It's the kind of thing that, you should have checked out and didn't. And having read this first book, I can say that Brother Cadfael is categorically very different from Dame Fervisa, and not merely because she is a woman and thus has to deal with particular social strictures that men do not. They are both exceedingly different characters. They have some similarities, but fundamentally they're very, very different. First of all, that Dame Fervisa, from what we gather in those books, basically the moment she really truly understood what a nun was and what a nun did, that as a child she knew that was what she wanted. There was no question, there was no other thing calling her. Whereas Brother Cadfael has come to joining the church much, much later in life. He has been on crusade to the Holy Land. He has had many relations with women, as, stated in this book. He's done a lot of traveling, which, granted, Dame Fervisa did as a child because her parents were apparently very peripatetic in nature, and until she wound up living with her uncle, was also, had traveled to many places, but that was as a child. And so it's a very, very fundamental difference to begin with. The second very fundamental difference is that Dame Fervisa as a book, her series, and granted maybe this changes in later books, I am basing this off of only this one book. But the interesting thing, the difference between them is also that she is very, very focused on and in constant consideration of, religion, of God, of contemplation of God, of the nature of sin, a whole bunch of things that, Brother Cadfael is not, completely ignoring this. Dame Fervisa spends a lot of time in the offices. That is, for anyone who doesn't know what an office is in this case, we're talking about the fact that the day for monks and nuns, that if you have done this, you have a series of offices, that is, sets of prayers done during the course of the day, starting at midnight and done at regular intervals throughout the day. The fact of the matter is, our 24-hour clock owes a lot, in point of fact, to the offices of the church, because what people used to do, what used to happen is that monasteries and nunneries and so on, you would have a bell, and the bell would be there to call the priesthood, the nuns, the monks to prayer, and you would have 24 hours or rather 24 points during the day, or at least a great many points during the day. It may be less than that, but I do know that they get called to prayer in the middle of the night. I mean, that may have changed. I don't know that much about the modern church, but in the medieval period, you would have that bell and it would ring in the middle of the night, and you get up and you do your prayer, and then you go back to bed, and then it rings again and you get up and you do your prayer and you go back to bed, and then you get up at stupid o'clock and you do another prayer, and then you get on with your day, and you are constantly interrupting your day to stop and go and do these prayers and then go back to whatever you're supposed to be doing. And so these are called offices. You know, the old song, Frère Jacques, I don't know what people title that in English, but that's, you know, are you sleeping, brother John? Morning bells are ringing. In French, sonne des matines, that is, the bells for matins are ringing. That is, the matins, which forms the basis of the French matin, which is morning, that's one of the offices, one of the morning offices. Anyways, and each of these has a particular set of prayers that you say at any given point during the day, whether it is praising God or asking for intercession or whatever it is that each individual one does. And the Dame Fervisa books are absolutely constantly peppered with the Latin of any given office that Fervisa is doing, that she has been called to, that she has had to interrupt her day for. Whereas those are given a bare mention by Brother Cadfael, who, in point of fact, in one of the, in an early part of this book, even talks about, you know, knowing how to sleep sitting upright so that he can sort of doze through these things. And this is very, very different from Dame Fervisa, who throws herself metaphorically into these wholeheartedly, who works very, very hard to enter this state of prayer, this state of existing in prayer, as it is described once, because this is something that speaks to her very, very deeply on a personal level. And so it's a very different approach to things. Fervisa, you know, there are limits and difficulties that also come with Fervisa being a woman, in that, you know, she can't be alone around men, and as you know, men are the ones who would be handling stuff with the bailiff, so she has that problem, and as a woman, many of her opinions and thoughts would be automatically discounted. But there's a lot that doesn't really necessarily seem to be a Brother Cadfael consideration. And so it makes for a very, very sharp contrast. Brother Cadfael also seems to be, you know, while somebody who doesn't have much of much patience or willingness to put up with fools, at the same time, he's much less sharp than Dame Fervisa. Not in an intellectual way, but in the way that with her, much of the time, there is an undertone of aggravation with people who are doing stupid things, aggravation with people who ought to know better, aggravation with many of those things, something that she is consciously aware of and is consciously, constantly telling herself she needs to dial back on, because, you know, judge not lest ye be judged, but also because, you know, you are supposed to be compassionate as a nun, and compassion is not her strong point. She just doesn't have the patience to be generally compassionate. She only has the patience to be compassionate for people who she looks at and says, oh yeah, you you deserve it. I have, I have feelings of compassion for you because you are somebody who has had a bad run of things, not because you've been an idiot. And Brother Cadfael feels a great deal less like somebody who just looks at people and says, okay, you're an idiot. And I say this in particular because the man who turns out to be the murderer, actually, he has a lot of fits, and they are written off at the start as religious things. You're supposed to look at that and think, oh, he's having, either that he's actually having seizures of some sort, or that he is faking having seizures. But Brother Cadfael seems to give him a lot more rope to hang himself with. Whereas Dame Frevisa, she doesn't really have a lot of patience with miracles and flailing arms, because while she believes truly and seriously and deeply, she's also sufficiently pragmatic as to just roll her eyes at people who, can't be bothered to like look at something seriously, and instead just go, oh, it's God, there's been flailing, and it's clearly just God. That she looks very cynically at things, and Brother Cadfael feels not necessarily more credulous, but less cynical. And so it makes for a very, very different atmosphere in these books. And I'm leaning very strongly into this because, as I said, the precise reason that I should have tried the Brother Cadfael series is the fact that I read so much of Dame Frevisa. And so it's a very, very sharp contrast. Now, there is, to an extent, the similarity, of course, of the pair of them having traveled, of the pair of them, because, as I said, when Dame Frevisa was very, very young, her parents took her all over the place. But it's also contrasted sharply because at the start of the Dame Frevisa series, while she is not a, novice young woman, freshly entered into the church, she is also not an old lady. She is probably, roughly, I would assume, in her 30s. Old enough that she's not, oh, look, she's so young, but young enough that she still has these moments of thinking that she wants to go traveling, these moments of thinking, well, if I could just arrange for a pilgrimage to an exciting place and I could see things. And she has to remind herself that, she is where she is, and she has sworn the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, and one of the things that, of her choice to be at St. Frida's Weeds is that she has made a choice to stay in one place. And so that contrasts sharply with Brother Cadfael as well, who is a much, much older man at the start of these books, who has had a fairly solidly lengthy life, and has been in the world and chosen to effectively retire to the abbey, to the monastery. And so it creates a contrast also because Dame Frevisa does feel limitations sometimes that I suspect Brother Cadfael doesn't, because his choice has come as a chosen retirement, whereas hers was taking herself out of the world early. So, yeah, I think that's all I have to say, and I haven't talked much about this book at all. But that's probably everything, and I will see you all next week.